10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 66. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 66 of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. If you're brand new to the show, we want to welcome you in. My name is Nick Manella. I'm the creator and host of the show, and our goal here every single week is to give you a short little jazz lesson to bring you through the week, give you something to work on, and we also have free downloadable PDFs for every single one of these episodes on 10minutejazzlesson.com. That's the number 10minutejazzlesson.com. All right, so let's jump into today's episode. Today's episode is going to be really cool. We're going to work off of some of the material that we brought up in episode 64, where we took a John Coltrane line and we really varied the rhythm. We kind of ripped it apart and we switched things around. We showed you how to kind of take one line and turn it into a whole bunch of different things. So today we're going to be utilizing that same line. If you haven't listened to episode 64, I suggest you go back because we're going to be looking at that piece of vocabulary for this episode. Now today, instead of shifting around the rhythm, what we're going to do is we're going to subtract some stuff from the line. We're going to edit some of the line. Now this is really important. This is something that we don't think of that often. I think when we're playing jazz, we're always trying to think about what we can add to our playing to make our playing better. But today we're going to talk about actually removing some of the stuff from your playing, or editing, as they say. So you kind of got to think about it in a different way, right? I mean, when you're speaking to somebody, if you were to say everything that was in your mind when you were speaking to them, it would come out as kind of a jumbled mess of ideas that doesn't really make any sense. So therefore, when we're speaking to somebody, like for instance, when I'm speaking to you on this podcast, I have to edit what I say in order to really truly make sense, get down to the heart of the matter, and come up with creative ways to get my ideas across that will actually cause you to listen to them and get something out of it. So we're going to do the same thing with our vocabulary, right? We took this Coltrane line that has a lot of notes in it. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of subtract some of the notes to make a different line. And also we're teaching ourselves when we're doing this to show some restraint. And that's also very hard, like especially on an instrument like saxophone, where it's very easy to play way too much, to just kind of move your fingers and get a whole bunch of notes to come out, but those notes don't really mean anything. One thing that's really, really good to work on a consistent and regular basis is saying less but meaning more, right? This is even the topic of one of my Motivation Monday podcasts where, doing less sometimes equals more. So this is a big theme that I've been thinking about a lot lately in my playing, and I figured why not turn it into a lesson for you guys. So the first thing we should look at is Coltrane's original line. You heard this in episode 64, but I'm just going to go ahead and start the podcast out by stating Coltrane's original idea so that you know the piece of vocabulary that we're going to be editing from. So this is a 2-5-1. It's in the key of C major, and obviously I'm going to be playing it on tenor saxophone, so really it's in B flat, but it doesn't really matter because you should be shifting this stuff around to different keys, so don't get too hung up on what key I'm playing it in. Realize that you're going to need to put it in several keys. So here is what the original line sounds like so that we have a base to work from on our editing duties. This is also not on the PDF this week. Go back to the PDF from episode 64, and the first lick on that PDF is the one that we're working from. Here's what that sounds like. All right, so we're taking that line and we're going to start to edit it. So one of the first things that I'm going to do is very, very minor edit. I'm going to take the beat from the first measure on beat 4, and I'm just simply going to remove that, replace it with a rest. So this is going to sound extremely close to the original line, but this is how we start to get into it. We're just going to subtract something very, very small from the lick. Here's what it sounds like with no note on beat 4. Now I'm getting a little bit more syncopation involved because I'm only going to be playing on the off beats in the first measure. So check out what this sounds like. So a very minor edit, but you can hear the difference between the sound, right? So line number 2, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the long note in the first measure on the and of 2, and I'm going to go ahead and remove that. So now I'm resting on beats 1, 2, and 3 in the first measure, and I'm not coming in until beat 4. So I'm giving myself a little bit of silence. This is something that we talked about last week with that Phil Woods line, is that sometimes silence can be just as effective as playing notes, right? And I think that this is a good example of that, because typically what we do is when we see a 2-5-1, we start playing on beat 1 of the 2 chord, and we just continue playing that all the way through. So this will be showing a little bit of restraint on the 2 chord and not playing anything until beat 4 on that 2 chord. Here's what that sounds like. One, two, three. So now we're going to shift a little bit and we're going to start editing over the 5 chord. So we're keeping the measure of the 2 chord exactly the same, and now we're going to remove some things from the next measure. So if you look at example number 3, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the 8th note on beat 3, the and of 3, and beat 4. So now I'm leaving a little bit of a gap in the middle of the 5 chord measure, and again, I'm just showing some restraint. As soon as I get going on my running 8th notes, I'm not just going to keep playing 8th notes without stopping at all. And again, this is going to give me a little bit more syncopation because I'm going to rest right in the middle of that 5 chord measure all the way until the and of 4. And then the note that you're going to hear played and accented is going to be on that and of 4. So now we're shifting into editing the 5 chord. Check out what this sounds like. So I think that one in particular changes the sound of the line a lot. Working over the 5 chord is going to change the sound of the line a lot more than working over the 2 chord, because that's our measure where we try to create a lot of tension, right, before the release of the 1 chord. So changing anything over there is going to definitely change the line drastically. So if we move on to the next line, what we're doing is we're removing the 16th notes out of the line. So the 2 chord measure stays exactly the same, but then when we get to beat 1 over the 5 chord, we're no longer playing 16th notes, and this is also a great way to make the line a little bit easier. If this lick is a little bit too difficult for you to pull off, this would be a great way to edit it, taking out the difficult part, which is the 16th notes. So basically what I'm doing is I'm removing the last 2 16th notes from beat 1. So I'm simply going to play, over the 5 chord, we get this 16th note line that's, 5, 7, 9, 11. But all we're going to do is we're going to turn it into 8th notes, and we're going to play 5, 7, and then when we jump up to the 3rd, we're just going to come right down the scale again. So this is really simplifying the line, editing it by taking out the fastest part with the greatest concentration of notes and turning it into a purely 8th note line. This will give us a completely different sound. Check out example number 4. So I really like that one. That is one that I would probably give to some of my students, especially some of my students who are more on the sort of beginner level, because it's just going to be easier for them to play and hear without the 16th notes in there. So I definitely dig that one. I think that's a great use of editing, and it just makes things a lot simpler. And then adding the 16th notes in after you learn that line would be very, very simple. So for our last example, what we're going to edit is both the 5-chord measure and the 1-chord measure. So we're combining a little bit. And it is important to realize that you can combine any of these. So what we're going to do is we took the 16th notes out again, and we replaced them with a quarter note this time, so even simpler over the 5-chord. And then we took the 1-chord and we replaced that 3-beat line with a 2-beat line, and that's going to switch up the sound of that 1-chord, which is also a very, very important chord because that's our resolution point. So now I'm doing two things, and this should be kind of your job, is like try to edit one measure at a time. Then when you get good at that, try editing the entire line. Edit something in every single measure and see what you can come up with. So here's the final line on your exercise sheet for this week, where I'm editing the line over the 5-chord and the 1-chord. So there you have it. There's a little bit of editing. There's 5 lines, or 5 different ways to edit our original line. Now this is just like what I said, 2 weeks ago, is that there's hundreds, probably thousands of different ways that you could edit this line and come up with something different but close to what Coltrane played. And that's what you need to focus on doing, because that's going to bring out your personality in the music, and you're really just learning how to show restraint. And showing restraint when you're playing jazz, especially over some of the standards and swing tunes, it's just so important. It shows musical maturity. A lot of different teachers in my life have mentioned this kind of stuff. Jerry Bergonzi is big on, editing yourself. Learn how to play a bunch of notes, then go back and edit yourself. So I think this stuff is really, really important. If you'd like to know any more about it, please just email me at 10minutejazzlesson@gmail.com. Send me any questions you might have. Send me any lines that you may have written off of this Coltrane line, and I would be happy to look at those and kind of maybe incorporate those into my playing as well. I always love seeing the stuff that you guys come up with, because it lets me know that you're really listening to the show and putting some of the stuff into action. So get in touch. I would love to hear from you, and have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next week with a brand new episode. Bye.